On the day I tried to help one more time, my daughter-in-law looked into my eyes and said, "There's no room for parasites here." 3 words later, Karma shut her mouth. I remember standing in their living room, the afternoon light filtering through the curtains I had helped them buy, touching the arm of the sofa I had purchased when they moved in. The word hung in the air like poison. Parasite. Me. The woman who had kept them afloat for 3 years, who had answered every panicked phone call, who had wired money at midnight when emergencies struck. I felt something break inside my chest. Not my heart exactly, but something deeper. My dignity, perhaps. Or maybe it was the last thread of the illusion I had been clinging to. The one that whispered they loved me, despite everything. Let me take you back. Let me show you how we got here. Because this story doesn't begin with that word. It begins 3 years earlier when my son Max called me, his voice tight with stress. He and Lena had just moved to the city, chasing better opportunities, he said. The rent was higher than they expected. Could I help? Just for a couple of months? Until his commission check started coming in. Of course I could. What kind of mother would I be if I said no? That first transfer was $800. I remember sitting at my kitchen table logging into my bank account, feeling that warm glow of being needed, of being useful. My late husband had left me comfortable, not wealthy, but secure. I had worked as a teacher for 37 years, and combined with his pension, I had enough. Enough to live, enough to help, enough to matter. Except 2 months became 4. 4 became 8. The emergency fund I dipped into for their broken car became a pattern. Every month something new. The rent, always the rent. Then groceries because Lena had lost her part-time job. Then the electric bill because winter was brutal. Then furniture because they couldn't keep sleeping on an air mattress, could they? Then medical bills, car insurance, a new laptop for Max's work, kitchen appliances, winter coats, birthday gifts for Lena's family that somehow I was expected to fund. I started keeping track, not because I wanted to hold it over them, but because I needed to understand where my money was going. My retirement savings, the nest egg I had built over decades of careful living, was shrinking faster than I had anticipated. In 36 months, I had transferred, gifted, and loaned them $33,400. $33,400. I would sit at night, looking at the spreadsheet I kept hidden in a folder on my computer, and wonder when it would stop. When would they stand on their own feet? But every time I thought about saying no, about drawing a line, Max would call. "Mom?" he would say, and I could hear the little boy in his voice, the one who had scraped his knee and run to me for comfort. "We're trying so hard. Things are just tight right now. It'll get better." And I would believe him because what choice did I have? He was my son, my only child, the person I had raised, loved, sacrificed for. Surely that counted for something. I started noticing things, small things that nagged at me. When I visited their apartment, I saw new decorations, expensive throw pillows, a smart TV mounted on the wall. Lena's nails were always perfectly manicured, her hair freshly highlighted. They went out to dinner, posted photos on social media from trendy restaurants and weekend trips. But when I asked about paying me back even just a little, there was always a reason why they couldn't. "Not yet, Mom. Soon. We promise." The invitations to family dinners became less frequent. When I did visit, I felt like an outsider in the home I had essentially furnished. Lena would make comments, small cutting remarks wrapped in jokes. "Oh, Renat brought flowers again, how quaint." Or, "I guess when you have time to garden, you can afford to be generous with your clippings." I laughed along, not wanting to cause friction, not wanting to be the difficult mother-in-law everyone complained about. I started feeling invisible. I would offer to help with dinner, and Lena would wave me away like I was incompetent. I would try to start conversations, and they would drift to their phones. I brought gifts. Homemade treats from my kitchen, stories from my week, anything to feel connected. And I was met with polite smiles that never reached their eyes, with thank yous that sounded like obligations, with kisses on the cheek that felt like dismissals. Then came the day that changed everything. I had called ahead, asking if I could stop by with some soup I had made. Max said, "Sure, come over." When I arrived, they were in the middle of some discussion, looking at paint samples spread across the dining table. They were planning to redecorate, Lena explained. Maybe an accent wall in the bedroom. I smiled, setting down my container of soup, and made an innocent comment. "That sounds lovely. If you need help with costs, I could contribute." The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Lena looked at Max, then back at me, and her face transformed into something I had never seen before. Her eyes went cold, her mouth tight. She stood up, crossing her arms, and I knew I had made a terrible mistake, though I couldn't understand what it was. "We don't need your help, Renate," she said, her voice like ice. "We're perfectly capable of managing our own home." I blinked, confused. "I was just offering," I said quietly. "I know things have been tight." That's when she said it, each word a nail being driven into my coffin of illusions. "There's no room for parasites here." The room spun. I gripped the back of a chair, the same chair I had bought them from a furniture store, the one with the comfortable cushion and the modern design Lena had admired. Parasites. She had called me a parasite, me who had given them everything, me who had sacrificed my own comfort, my own security to keep them afloat. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. Max didn't defend me. He looked uncomfortable, staring at his feet, but he didn't say a word, not one word. My son, the boy I had raised alone after his father died, who I had put through college by working summer jobs and taking night shifts, who I had supported through every failure and celebrated through every success, stood there in silence while his wife called me a parasite. I left without another word. I got in my car, drove home in a daze, and sat in my driveway for 20 minutes before I could make my legs work. When I finally got inside, I went straight to my office, opened my laptop, and stared at that spreadsheet. $33,400, 3 years of rent payments, grocery runs, emergency funds, furniture, appliances, bills, gifts. 3 years of being there, being available, being the safety net they could count on. And I was the parasite. Something shifted in me that night. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had eaten meals alone for years after my husband passed, where I had planned lessons for my students, where I had celebrated birthdays and mourned losses, and I felt something I had never allowed myself to feel before. Anger. Pure, clean, righteous anger. Not just at Lena, though she was certainly the catalyst, but at myself, for being so desperate to be needed that I had let myself be used, for confusing love with transactions, for teaching my son that my worth was measured in dollar signs. I pulled out a notebook, one of the blank journals I kept for grocery lists and gardening notes, and I started writing every single thing I could remember, every transfer, every gift, every emergency. I went through my bank statements, 3 years of records, highlighting and annotating. Rent for their apartment, $800 a month for 36 months. That was $28,800 right there. Groceries, averaging $200 a month. That was another $7,200. Then the extras. The car repair, $1,800. The furniture, $3,000. The laptop, $1,200. Medical bills, appliance replacements, insurance payments. The list went on and on. When I was finished, it was past midnight. I sat back and looked at the pages spread before me, my hand cramping from writing. The total was actually higher than my spreadsheet had shown. I had forgotten things, small amounts here and there that added up. $37,200. Over 3 years, I had given them $37,200 of my retirement money, my security, my future. And I was the parasite. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I kept hearing that word over and over. Parasite. An organism that lives off another, taking without giving, draining its host. The definition fit them perfectly, not me. I was the host they had been draining for 3 years, And when I had finally run dry enough to notice, when I had dared to set a boundary, however small, they had turned it around on me. From today forward, I choose myself. I whispered the words into the darkness, and they felt like a promise, like a vow. I had spent my entire life choosing other people, my students, who I had stayed late for, buying supplies with my own money when the school budget ran out, my husband, who I had nursed through his final illness, putting my own health and needs aside, my son, who I had centered my world around, making sure he had every opportunity, every advantage. And where had it gotten me? Alone, depleted, and called a parasite by people who owed me everything. The next morning I got up early. I showered, dressed in my good slacks and a blazer, and drove to my bank. I had done my research through the sleepless night, reading articles on my phone about financial boundaries, about elder financial abuse, about how to protect myself. The term elder financial abuse had made me pause. Was that what this was? I was 72, but I didn't feel elderly. I felt clear-headed, strong, capable. But the definition fit. Family members exploiting an older person's financial resources for their own benefit. Creating dependence, using emotional manipulation to maintain access to money. At the bank, I asked to speak with my account manager, a young man named David, who had helped me set up automatic transfers years ago. He smiled when he saw me. That professional, friendly smile bank employees perfect. "Mrs. Fisher, how can I help you today?" I sat down across from his desk and pulled out my notebook. "I need to make some changes," I said. My voice was steady, calm. "I want to cancel all automatic transfers to my son's account. I want to set up alerts for any attempts to access my accounts. And I want to know what options I have to protect my assets." David's smile faded. He looked concerned. "Mrs. Fisher, is everything all right? Are you feeling okay?" I understood why he was asking. Elderly people changing their financial arrangements suddenly could be a sign of confusion, of dementia, of being influenced by scammers. But I wasn't confused. I had never been more clear in my life. "Everything is fine," I assured him. "I'm making informed decisions about my own money. I'm completely lucid, and I'm doing this of my own free will. Can you help me, or do I need to speak to someone else?" He helped me. We went through everything. I canceled the automatic transfers that had been draining $800 from my account every month like clockwork. I set up security questions and two-factor authentication. I changed my PIN. I made it clear that no one, not my son, not his wife, no one was authorized to access my accounts or make decisions about my money. David made notes, printed confirmations, and by the time I left that bank, I felt lighter, freer, like I had taken the first step on a journey I should have started years ago. My phone started ringing that afternoon. Max, 3 missed calls. Then Lena, 2 calls. Then Max again. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready. I needed time to fortify myself, to prepare for what I knew was coming. They had noticed the missing transfer. The rent was due, and for the first time in 3 years I hadn't paid it. The next day, they showed up at my house. I saw them through the window, Max and Lena walking up my driveway with determined expressions. My heart hammered in my chest. I could have pretended not to be home, but I was done hiding. I was done making myself smaller to accommodate their comfort. I opened the door before they could knock. "We need to talk," Max said. His face was tight, stressed. "Mom, what's going on? The rent didn't transfer?" I stood in the doorway, not inviting them in. "I canceled it," I said simply. Lena's eyes widened. "You canceled it? Why would you do that?" Her voice was sharp, accusatory. "Because I'm done," I said. "I'm done paying your bills. I'm done being your backup plan. I'm done being treated like an ATM with feelings." That's when they brought out their weapons. "Mom, are you feeling okay?" Max asked, his voice dripping with false concern. "Have you been forgetting things? Maybe we should take you to the doctor." I felt a chill run down my spine. This was a tactic I had read about online, questioning the mental competence of an older person to maintain control over their finances. Lena chimed in, her voice sweet as poison. "We're just worried about you, Renate. You're not acting like yourself. Maybe you need help managing things. I stepped back, my hand on the door, ready to close it. I'm perfectly fine, I said, my voice cold. I'm more clear-headed than I've been in years, and you need to leave. But we need to talk about the rent, Lena insisted, her mask slipping, showing the desperation underneath. We have a lease. You can't just stop helping us. Watch me, I said, and then I closed the door in their faces. I locked it, threw the deadbolt, and leaned against the wood, my heart racing. I could hear them on the other side arguing in hushed voices, then footsteps retreating. I went to the window and watched them get in their car, Lena gesturing angrily, Max gripping the steering wheel. They sat there for 10 minutes before driving away, and I knew this wasn't over. I was right. 2 days later they came back, and this time they weren't alone. They had brought a lawyer, or at least someone they introduced as a lawyer, a young man in an ill-fitting suit with a briefcase that looked borrowed. Mrs. Fisher, he said smoothly, I'm here representing your son and daughter-in-law. They're concerned about your recent behavior. They feel you may not be making sound decisions. We'd like to discuss arranging some help for you. Perhaps letting them manage your finances to ensure you're taken care of. I stood in my doorway, this time with my own phone in my hand, recording. I had learned that trick from an online forum for people dealing with financial abuse. Document everything. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own finances, I said clearly, speaking into the phone as much as to them. I have no cognitive impairment. I'm making conscious, informed decisions about my own money. If you continue to harass me, I'll be contacting the police. The young man faltered. Lena stepped forward. Renata, we're not trying to harass you. We're trying to help. You're confused. You're at an age where things get difficult. Let us help you. That word again. Confused. As if clarity was the same as dementia. As if setting boundaries was the same as losing my mind. I'm not confused, I said, my voice like steel. I'm conscious. And you need to get off my property. Max finally spoke. Mom, please. Just listen. You're being unreasonable. That word broke something in me. Unreasonable. After 3 years of being more than reasonable. After $37,000 of being reasonable. After every late-night emergency call, and every guilt trip, and every expectation that I would just keep giving and giving and giving. Unreasonable? I repeated. I'll tell you what's unreasonable. Living off your mother's retirement fund for 3 years, and then calling her a parasite. Now get out. I closed the door again, locked it, and this time I didn't watch them leave. I went straight to my computer and started looking up lawyers. Real ones. I needed help, professional help, because I could see where this was heading. They weren't going to let this go. They had built their lifestyle on my money, and they would fight to keep their access to it. I found a lawyer named Patricia Chen, who specialized in elder law and financial abuse cases. Her website showed a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense expression. I called her office, explained my situation to her assistant, and made an appointment for the next day. That night, I couldn't eat. I made myself tea and sat in my garden, the place that had always brought me peace, and I felt utterly alone. But alone wasn't the same as lonely, I was learning. Alone meant I only had to take care of myself. Alone meant freedom. Patricia's office was in a small building downtown, the kind of place that felt professional without being intimidating. She met me in the waiting room herself, shaking my hand firmly. Mrs. Fisher, come in. Tell me what's going on. I sat in a comfortable chair across from her desk and I told her everything. The 3 years of payments, the mounting demands, the word parasite, the visit with the fake lawyer, the accusations of confusion. I pulled out my notebook, showed her my records, my bank statements, everything I had documented. She listened without interrupting, making notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she sat back and looked at me seriously. Mrs. Fisher, what you're describing is textbook financial exploitation of an elder. It's actually a crime in this state. You have every right to control your own money, and what they're doing, especially trying to paint you as incompetent, is a form of abuse. We can fight this. We can protect you." Hearing it labeled as abuse was validating and terrifying at the same time. Abuse. I had been abused by my own son and his wife, not physically, but financially and emotionally. They had used me, drained me, and then gaslit me when I tried to stop it. Patricia outlined a plan. First, we would get a formal cognitive assessment from a neuropsychologist to establish my competence beyond any doubt. Second, we would document everything, every interaction, every threat, every attempt to access my accounts. Third, we would prepare for the possibility that they might escalate, possibly trying to get guardianship or conservatorship over me. That last part made my blood run cold. A guardianship. That would mean losing control over my own life, my own decisions, my own money. Patricia saw my fear. "It's unlikely," she reassured me. "You're clearly competent, but we need to be prepared. Elder financial abuse often involves family members trying to gain legal control. We'll make sure that doesn't happen." I left her office with a list of things to do. Change my locks, install security cameras, open a new bank account at a different bank, block Max and Lena's numbers except for emergencies, get the cognitive assessment scheduled, document everything. It felt like preparing for war, and I suppose that's exactly what it was. A war for my autonomy, my dignity, my right to say no. I started with the locks. I called a locksmith that afternoon, and by evening my doors had new locks, with keys that only I possessed. Then I ordered security cameras from an online store, the kind that recorded to the cloud, that couldn't be tampered with. I wasn't good with technology, but I followed the instructions carefully, and within 2 days, I had cameras watching my front door, back door, and driveway. It felt paranoid, but Patricia had insisted. "Evidence is everything," she had said. The cognitive assessment was scheduled for the following weeks with a neuropsychologist Patricia recommended. In the meantime, I went to a different bank across town and opened a new checking account. I transferred most of my savings into it, leaving only enough in the old account to cover my basic bills. If Max and Lena somehow got access to my old account, they would find it nearly empty. I blocked their numbers on my phone but set up a Google Voice number that would go straight to voicemail. That way, if they tried to contact me, I would have a record, but I wouldn't have to engage with them in the moment. Patricia had been clear about that. No direct contact unless absolutely necessary. Everything in writing or recorded. Protect yourself. The cognitive assessment was extensive. 3 hours of tests, questions, puzzles, memory exercises. The neuropsychologist, Dr. Ramirez, was thorough and kind. At the end, she smiled at me. "Mrs. Fisher, your cognitive function is excellent. Better than many people half your age, actually. You show no signs of dementia, confusion, or impairment. You're sharp as a tack." I almost cried with relief. I knew I was fine, but having it confirmed professionally felt like armor. Dr. Ramirez provided a detailed written report, which I immediately gave to Patricia. "This is perfect," Patricia said. "If they try to challenge your competence, we have expert testimony that you're completely sound. Now we wait and see what they do next." I didn't have to wait long. The first salvo came in the form of a social worker showing up at my door. She was a tired-looking woman in her 40s with a clipboard. "Mrs. Fisher, I'm Sandra Mills from Adult Protective Services. We received a report that you might be in need of assistance. May I come in?" My heart sank. They had called APS on me, painting me as a vulnerable elder in need of intervention. But I had been warned this might happen. Patricia had coached me. Be cooperative, be clear, show you're competent. I invited Sandra in, offered her tea, and we sat in my living room. She asked me questions about my daily routine, my health, my finances. I answered honestly, clearly. I showed her my clean home, my well-stocked kitchen, my medications organized in their weekly planner. I was calm, coherent, obviously capable. "Who made the report?" I asked. She couldn't tell me officially, but we both knew. She asked if I had family, if they were involved in my care. I have a son, I said carefully. We're currently estranged due to financial disagreements. He and his wife have been living off my retirement funds for 3 years, and when I set boundaries, they began questioning my mental competence. I'm working with a lawyer to protect myself from elder financial abuse. Sandra's expression shifted from concern to understanding. She made notes. Mrs. Fisher, you seem perfectly capable to me. I don't see any signs of self-neglect or exploitation. I'm going to close this case, but if you need resources or support, please don't hesitate to call. She gave me her card, and I walked her to the door. As she left, I saw my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, working in her garden. She waved, and I waved back, grateful for the witness. But that was just the beginning of their campaign. Over the next 2 weeks, they tried everything. They called my doctor's office, claiming I was having memory issues and asking for my medical records. The office called me to verify, and I informed them that no one had permission to access my information. They contacted my pharmacist, suggesting I was confused about my medications. The pharmacist, who had been filling my prescriptions for years, called me directly. Concerned, I assured her I was fine and asked her to make a note that no one else was authorized to pick up or discuss my medications. They even spoke to some of my neighbors, spinning stories about their poor elderly mother, who was being taken advantage of by scammers, who wasn't thinking clearly, who needed family intervention. Most of my neighbors knew me well enough to see through it, but a few seemed uncertain. I started making a point to be more visible, working in my garden, going to the community center, having coffee with friends. Let them see I was fine. Let them be witnesses to my competence. Patricia documented all of it. Every phone call, every visit, every attempt to paint me as incompetent. This is harassment, she said, and it's building our case. If they push this any further, we can file for a restraining order. I didn't want it to come to that, but I was prepared. I had drawn my line in the sand, and I would not cross back over it. My friends rallied around me. Women from my gardening club, from my book club, from church. When I finally told them what was happening, they were outraged. How dare they? My friend Margaret said over coffee. After everything you've done for that boy, they're disgraceful. These women became my support system, my witnesses, my proof that I was living a full, engaged, competent life. They wrote statements for Patricia, describing my activities, my mental clarity, my independence. One afternoon, I was at the salon getting my hair cut when the stylist, a chatty young woman named Amy, asked how I was doing. We had been making small talk about the weather, about her kids, about nothing important, but something in her voice made me look up and I saw genuine concern. Your son was in here last week, she said quietly, asking questions about you, saying you were having problems. I just wanted you to know. My stomach dropped. They were trying to build a narrative, talking to anyone who might interact with me, planting seeds of doubt. But Amy smiled. I told him you seemed perfectly fine to me, that you've been coming here for years and you've always been sharp and kind. I hope I didn't overstep. I reached out and squeezed her hand. Thank you, I said. You did exactly right. The cognitive assessment, the APS visit, the attempts to access my medical records, the whisper campaign among my neighbors and acquaintances. Patricia documented it all. This is a pattern, she explained. They're trying to establish grounds for a guardianship petition. They want to show you're not capable of managing your own affairs so they can take control. It's insidious and it's more common than people realize. The thought made me sick, but I wasn't helpless. I had evidence of my competence. I had witnesses. I had a lawyer who understood exactly what was happening. And I had something else. I had stopped being afraid. I had spent 3 years afraid of disappointing them, afraid of being alone, afraid of being a burden. But being called a parasite had burned that fear out of me. I was angry, and anger was fuel. Then came the letter. It arrived by certified mail, official and intimidating, a petition for limited guardianship and conservatorship. Max and Lena were taking me to court, claiming I was no longer capable of managing my financial affairs, that I was at risk of financial exploitation by scammers, that I needed someone to manage my assets for my own protection. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. I called Patricia immediately. She had been expecting this. "Okay," she said, her voice calm and steady. "Here's what we do. We fight. We show the court exactly what's happening here. We prove you're competent, and we expose their real motivation. This is going to be uncomfortable, Renate, but you're going to be fine." I believed her. I had to. The next few weeks were a blur of preparation. Patricia filed a response denying the allegations and counterclaiming elder financial abuse. We gathered evidence. My cognitive assessment, my bank statements showing the pattern of transfers, statements from friends and neighbors, the APS report that had cleared me, medical records showing I was in good health. We prepared testimony. We built a timeline of everything that had happened, from that first $800 transfer to the word parasite to this moment. Patricia also had me keep a detailed journal of every day. What I ate, what I did, who I talked to, what I was thinking. "It sounds tedious," she said, "but if they try to claim you have good days and bad days, we can show you're consistently competent." So I wrote. I documented my morning walks, my gardening, my reading, my grocery shopping, my coffee dates with friends. I documented the intrusive thoughts, the moments of doubt, the fear that maybe they were right, maybe I was being unreasonable. But mostly, I documented my clarity, my resolve, my certainty that I was doing the right thing. The hardest part was the emotional toll. This was my son, the baby I had held, the child I had raised, the man I had been so proud of. And he was taking me to court, trying to strip me of my autonomy, painting me as incompetent to a judge. At night, I would lie awake and wonder where I had gone wrong. Had I loved him too much? Not enough? Had I been too giving, teaching him to see me as a resource rather than a person? Or had I simply been unlucky, raising a son who grew into a man who valued money over love? Margaret came over one evening and found me crying in my kitchen. I had been strong for so long, but that day, it all caught up with me. "I'm losing my son," I told her through tears. "No," she said firmly, sitting down beside me and taking my hand. "You lost him 3 years ago when he let his wife call you a parasite. You're just admitting it now. And that's not your failure, Renate. That's his. The court date was set for a Tuesday morning in October. Patricia and I arrived early, going over everything one last time. We had prepared for every angle, every question, every attack. Patricia had coached me on how to respond, how to stay calm, how to present myself. "Don't get emotional," she said. "Be clear, be factual, be yourself. The truth is on your side." When Max and Lena arrived with their lawyer, I felt a jolt of pain seeing them. Max wouldn't meet my eyes. Lena looked determined, almost righteous, as if she genuinely believed she was doing the right thing. Their lawyer was older, more polished than the young man they had brought to my house. This was serious now. The hearing began. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Judge Harrison, read through the petition and our response. She looked at all of us seriously. "This is a guardianship hearing," she said. "The burden of proof is on the petitioners to show that Mrs. Fisher is incapable of managing her own affairs. Let's proceed." Max and Lena's lawyer went first. He painted a picture of a confused elderly woman, making erratic financial decisions, cutting off her own family, showing signs of paranoia and instability. He cited my canceling the automatic transfers, my changing of locks, my installation of security cameras. He suggested I was being influenced by outside forces, possibly financial predators. He made me sound like a victim who needed to be saved from myself. Then it was time for their testimony. Max took the stand first, and I watched my son lie under oath. He said I had been forgetful, repeating myself, getting confused about dates. He said I had accused them of things that never happened, that I had become suspicious and withdrawn. He said he was worried about me, that he just wanted to help, that he loved me. His voice even cracked with emotion. It was a performance, and it was convincing. Lena's testimony was similar. She talked about how I had been acting strangely, how I had accused them of taking advantage when all they had done was accept help I had offered. She conveniently forgot the word parasite. She made herself sound like a concerned daughter-in-law, worried about her husband's mother, just trying to do the right thing. The judge listened impassively, making notes. Then Patricia stood up for cross-examination, and the tide shifted. She started with Max. "Mr. Fisher, you testified that your mother has been forgetful and confused. When was the last time you visited her home?" Max hesitated. A few weeks ago." "And how did her home appear? Was it clean, organized?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, but—" "No buts," Patricia interrupted. "Was her home clean and organized?" "Yes. And you mentioned she was repeating herself. Can you give me a specific example with a date and context?" Max couldn't. He fumbled, providing vague generalities. Patricia moved in. "Mr. Fisher, let's talk about the financial support your mother has provided you over the past 3 years. How much money would you estimate she's given you?" "I don't know exactly," Max said. "Take a guess." "I don't know. 5,000? 10,000? Patricia pulled out the bank statements. "According to these records, which we will be entering into evidence, your mother has transferred or given you and your wife approximately $37,200 over 36 months. Does that sound accurate?" The courtroom went quiet. Max's face went red. I didn't realize it was that much. "So you don't deny receiving the money?" "No, but—" "And when did you last pay any of it back?" "We haven't been able to yet." "So your mother gave you $37,000. You haven't repaid any of it. And when she set a boundary and stopped giving you money, you filed for guardianship. Is that correct?" Max looked miserable. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like, Mr. Fisher?" He had no good answer. Patricia dismissed him and turned to Lena. The cross-examination was even more brutal. Patricia established that Lena had never liked me, that she had made disparaging comments about me, that she had been the driving force behind many of the financial requests. And then came the question I had been waiting for. "Mrs. Fisher," Patricia said, "did you ever refer to Renate as a parasite?" Lena's eyes widened. "No," she said too quickly. "Are you sure? Because we have witnesses who will testify otherwise." Lena backtracked. "I may have said something in the heat of the moment, but—" "So you did call her a parasite?" "I was frustrated. She was interfering by offering to help pay for your home renovations. Is that interference or generosity?" Lena had no response. Patricia let the silence hang, then moved on. "Let's talk about your attempts to access Mrs. Fisher's medical records. Did you contact her doctor's office?" "I was concerned." "Did you contact her pharmacist?" "Yes." "Did you call Adult Protective Services and make a report?" "Yes, because your meal ticket cut you off and you needed to regain control?" Their lawyer objected. The judge sustained it, but the point had been made. Patricia sat down and it was our turn. I took the stand, my heart hammering but my mind clear. Patricia led me through my testimony gently. I explained my background, my career, my financial situation. I explained the 3 years of supporting Max and Lena, the mounting costs, the lack of appreciation. I explained the incident with the word parasite and how it had opened my eyes. Then Patricia asked the crucial question. "Mrs. Fisher, why did you cut off financial support to your son?" I looked directly at the judge. "Because my money doesn't buy me the place they deny me in their lives. For 3 years I gave them everything they asked for, and more. I was still treated like an outsider, an inconvenience, a burden. And when I offered one more time to help, I was called a parasite. That was the moment I realized I had been enabling their dependence while they resented my existence. I chose to stop, not because I'm confused or incompetent, but because I finally became clear-headed enough to see the truth." Their lawyer tried to shake my testimony on cross-examination. He asked about my age, my health, whether I took any medications that might affect my judgment. I answered each question calmly, clearly. "Yes, I'm 72. Yes, I take medication for blood pressure and cholesterol, both well controlled. No, neither affects my cognitive function. He asked why I had suddenly become paranoid, installing cameras and changing locks. I wasn't paranoid, I explained. I was protecting myself after being threatened and harassed, after they brought a fake lawyer to my door trying to intimidate me into giving them access to my finances. He tried one more angle. Mrs. Fisher, isn't it possible you're overreacting? That your son and daughter-in-law genuinely care about you, and you've misunderstood their intentions? I looked at him steadily. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. They showed me I was a parasite in their eyes. They showed me I was only valuable when I was writing checks. I believed them. That's not misunderstanding. That's clarity. Patricia called her witnesses next. Dr. Ramirez, the neuropsychologist, testified about my cognitive assessment. She was unequivocal. Mrs. Fisher scored in the superior range for her age group, across all measures. Her memory, executive function, problem-solving, and judgment are all excellent. There is no evidence of any cognitive impairment whatsoever. The cross-examination couldn't shake her. She had objective test results, standardized measures, professional expertise. Then came my friends. Margaret testified about our weekly coffee dates, our book club discussions, my active participation in community activities. She's one of the sharpest people I know, Margaret said firmly. She remembers everything we read. She contributes thoughtful insights. She manages her own household and finances without any difficulty. When their lawyer tried to suggest I might have good days and bad days, Margaret shut him down. I've known Renate for 15 years. She's consistent. She's always been consistent. Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor, testified about seeing me maintain my home and garden, about the social worker visit she had witnessed, about Max and Lena coming to my house and the confrontation she had overheard from her yard. They were the ones yelling, she said. Renate was calm. She asked them to leave, and they wouldn't. She's been nothing but competent and kind in all the years I've known her. David from the bank testified about our meeting, about how I had clearly and rationally explained my reasons for changing my account access, about how I had demonstrated full understanding of the financial decisions I was making. She knew exactly what she was doing, he said. She was making informed choices about her own money. There was nothing confused or coerced about it. Sandra Mills from Adult Protective Services testified that her investigation had found no evidence of self-neglect, cognitive impairment, or exploitation by outside parties. In fact, she said, the only potential exploitation I identified was financial exploitation by family members. Mrs. Fisher was very clear about that. She's protecting herself appropriately. The evidence mounted. Patricia entered my detailed journal into the record, showing consistent competence over months. She entered the bank statements, showing the pattern of transfers, and then their sudden cessation. She entered the timeline of harassment, the fake lawyer, the medical records requests, the whisper campaign, the APS report. She painted a picture of a competent woman being systemically targeted by family members who wanted access to her money. Then came Patricia's closing argument, and it was devastating. Your Honor, she began, this is not a case about an elderly woman who needs protection. This is a case about an elderly woman who is already protecting herself from financial abuse by her own family. The evidence is overwhelming. Mrs. Fisher is cognitively intact, physically healthy, socially engaged, and financially responsible. She managed her own affairs perfectly well, while simultaneously supporting her son and daughter-in-law to the tune of $37,000 over 3 years. The moment she stopped, they questioned her competence. That's not concern. That's control. She walked the judge through everything. The petitioners claim Mrs. Fisher is at risk of financial exploitation, yet the only people who have exploited her financially are sitting right here. They claim she's making erratic decisions, yet the only decision that concerns them is her decision to stop funding their lifestyle. They claim she's confused and paranoid, Yet every professional who has evaluated her says she's perfectly competent. They claim they love her and want to help her. Yet they called her a parasite when she offered to help them. Patricia paused, letting that sink in. Your Honor, what we have here is a textbook case of elder financial abuse masquerading as guardianship concern. The petitioners have a clear financial motive. They've been living off Mrs. Fisher's retirement funds, and they want that to continue. When she set boundaries, they launched a campaign to paint her as incompetent, so they could legally force her to continue supporting them. This is not about her welfare. This is about their wallet, she concluded powerfully. Mrs. Fisher is not an ATM with feelings, despite how she's been treated. She's a retired teacher who worked for 37 years, who saved and planned for her retirement, who has every right to control her own money and her own life. She's a woman who finally said enough after years of being used. And for that act of self-preservation, of setting a healthy boundary, she's been dragged into court and accused of being incompetent. The only thing Mrs. Fisher is guilty of is choosing herself. And in this country, competent adults have the right to make their own choices, even if those choices disappoint their family members. The petition should be denied. Their lawyer gave his closing, trying to salvage something. He emphasized my age, suggested that Patricia had manipulated me, claimed that financial elder abuse could go both ways, that maybe I was being controlled by my lawyer or other influences. It was weak, and everyone in the courtroom could feel it. The evidence wasn't on his side, and he knew it. Judge Harrison took a short recess to review the evidence. Those 20 minutes felt like hours. I sat with Patricia in the hallway, my hands shaking despite my best efforts to stay calm. You did great, Patricia said. The judge saw through their nonsense, but I couldn't relax. Not until I heard the verdict, not until I knew I would keep my autonomy. When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Harrison had her decision ready. She looked at all of us seriously, and when she spoke, her voice carried authority and, I thought, a hint of anger. I've reviewed all the evidence and testimony in this case, and I'm going to be very direct. The petition for guardianship and conservatorship is denied. I felt Patricia squeeze my hand. But the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, she continued, I find the petition to be without merit, and quite possibly brought in bad faith. The evidence overwhelmingly demonstrates that Mrs. Renate Fisher is a competent, cognitively intact adult who is fully capable of managing her own affairs. She has been independently evaluated by a neuropsychologist who found her cognitive function to be excellent. She has been investigated by Adult Protective Services and cleared. She maintains an active social life, manages her home, and demonstrates clear reasoning and sound judgment. Judge Harrison looked directly at Max and Lena. What I see here is not a confused, elderly woman who needs protection. What I see is a woman who was financially supporting her adult son and daughter-in-law for years, who finally set a boundary, and who has been systematically harassed and undermined as a result. The timing of this petition, coming immediately after Mrs. Fisher stopped making financial transfers, is highly suspect. The court finds no evidence that Mrs. Fisher is at risk from outside exploitation. The only financial exploitation in evidence is exploitation by the petitioners themselves. The judge's voice grew stern. Let me be clear. Mrs. Fisher has the right to spend or not spend her money as she sees fit. She has the right to change her mind about financial support. She has the right to set boundaries with her family. These are not signs of incompetence. These are signs of autonomy. And attempting to strip an elder of their autonomy through guardianship proceedings when there is no legitimate basis is a serious matter. I'm denying this petition with prejudice, meaning it cannot be refiled without substantial new evidence of changed circumstances. She looked at me, and her expression softened slightly. Mrs. Fisher, you have every right to live your life as you choose. Your financial decisions are your own. I hope you continue to enjoy your retirement on your own terms. Then she dismissed the case, and it was over. I sat there for a moment, letting it sink in. I had won. I had fought for my autonomy, my dignity, my right to say no. And I had won. Patricia hugged me, and I hugged her back, tears streaming down my face. These weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of vindication, of triumph. Max and Lena left quickly, not looking at me, their lawyer trailing behind them. I watched them go, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no longing. They had shown me who they were, and I had believed them. Whatever relationship we had once had, it was gone now, burned up in the courtroom, along with their credibility. The aftermath was quiet. Patricia filed a motion for me to recover my legal fees, arguing that the petition had been brought in bad faith. The judge agreed, ordering Max and Lena to pay my attorney costs. It was a small victory on top of the larger one, but it mattered. They had tried to take everything from me, and instead, they lost. I went home that day and sat in my garden, the place I had always found peace. The autumn sun was warm on my face, and my flowers were still blooming, bright and defiant against the cooling weather. I thought about the past 3 years, about all the money and time and emotional energy I had poured into people who saw me as nothing more than a source of funds. And I thought about the past few months, about standing up for myself, about fighting back, about choosing myself. From today forward, I choose myself. I had whispered those words in the darkness months ago, and I had kept that promise. I had chosen myself over their comfort. I had chosen my financial security over their expectations. I had chosen my dignity over their approval. And it felt good. It felt right. It felt like freedom. Over the next few weeks, I started reclaiming my life. I changed my phone number, giving it only to people I trusted. I started planning a trip to Italy, something I had always wanted to do but had kept postponing. I donated money to organizations that fought elder financial abuse, hoping my contribution might help someone else find the courage to set boundaries. I joined a new book club, started taking a watercolor class, volunteered at the local library reading to children. I heard through mutual acquaintances about what was happening with Max and Lena. Without my financial support, reality hit them hard. They had to move to a smaller, cheaper apartment. Lena had to take a full-time job, not just part-time work when she felt like it. Max had to face that his commissions weren't as good as he had claimed, that he had been coasting on my subsidies. They had to budget, to sacrifice, to work hard like everyone else. They had to learn to stand on their own feet, something they should have learned years ago. Part of me felt satisfaction at that. Not vindictive satisfaction, but the satisfaction of natural consequences taking effect. They had lived beyond their means on my dime. And when I stopped providing that dime, they had to adjust. That was fair. That was appropriate. That was karma, not in some mystical sense, but in the simple reality that actions have consequences. They had treated me as a parasite while parasitically living off me. Now they had to learn to survive without a host. There's no room for parasites here. That phrase haunted me for a while, but eventually I reclaimed it. I turned it around. There's no room for parasites in my life, I would think. Not parasites who drain my bank account. Not parasites who take my love and give back contempt. Not parasites who see me as a means to an end rather than a person worthy of respect. I had cleared my life of parasites, and I was healthier for it. Friends asked if I felt sad about losing my son. The question was complicated. Yes, I felt sad about the loss of what I had thought we had. I felt sad about the illusion being shattered. But I didn't feel sad about the reality. The reality was that my son had become someone who would financially exploit his mother and then try to have her declared incompetent when she resisted. That person? I wasn't sad to be free of that person. If Max ever did the work to become someone else, someone honest and empathetic and respectful, maybe we could rebuild something. But that was on him, not me. I had done enough. I spent Thanksgiving that year with Margaret and her family. They welcomed me warmly, treating me like beloved family rather than an obligation. We ate turkey and pie, played board games with her grandchildren, laughed until our stomachs hurt. At the end of the night, Margaret's husband Tom pulled me aside. "You seem different, Renate," he said. "Lighter." "I feel lighter," I admitted, like I put down a weight I didn't know I was carrying. He nodded. "Good for you. You deserve to be happy." Christmas came and went. I sent no card to Max and Lena, received none from them. I had thought that would hurt more than it did, but I was genuinely content. I decorated my house for myself, baked cookies for my neighbors, donated to toy drives, attended midnight mass. I celebrated the holiday without the undercurrent of obligation and resentment that had colored the past few years. It was peaceful. In January, I did something I had been thinking about for months. I wrote a letter to the local newspaper's advice column, anonymously sharing my story. I had been financially supporting my adult son for years. I wrote, "When I set boundaries, he tried to have me declared incompetent. I fought back and won. If anyone reading this is in a similar situation, being used by family, afraid to say no, questioning whether you have the right to control your own money, you do. You have the right. Get help. Document everything. Protect yourself. You're not crazy and you're not selfish. You're just finally seeing clearly." The newspaper printed it, and the response was overwhelming. The advice columnist wrote a detailed response about elder financial abuse, about the red flags, about resources available. But what really struck me were the letters to the editor that followed in subsequent weeks. Other people, mostly older women, sharing similar stories, thanking me for speaking up, saying they had felt alone, and now realized they weren't. Some said my letter had given them courage to set their own boundaries. I realized then that my story mattered beyond just my own life. Financial abuse of elders is common, often hidden, frequently perpetrated by family members who should be trustworthy. It thrives in silence and shame. By speaking up, even anonymously, I was helping to break that silence. I was helping others feel less alone. That felt important. That felt like purpose. By spring, I had settled into my new life completely. My days were full but not frantic. I gardened. I painted watercolors. Badly but joyfully. I read voraciously. I traveled to Italy and fell in love with Florence. I had coffee with friends, volunteered with literacy programs, attended concerts and lectures. I managed my own finances carefully, watching my savings slowly recover now that they weren't being drained. I was living the retirement I had planned for and earned. One afternoon, I was at the farmer's market when I ran into an old colleague from my teaching days. We caught up over samples of local cheese and fresh bread. She asked about Max, having known him when he was young. "We're not in contact anymore," I said simply. "Oh no, what happened?" she asked, her face full of concern. "I set some boundaries that needed to be set," I explained. "It didn't go well. I'm sad about that, but I'm at peace with my decision." She looked at me thoughtfully. "You know, Renate, I remember when you first started teaching. You were so young, so eager to help every single student, even the ones who were using you. You would stay late every night, buy supplies with your own money, give second and third and fourth chances. I remember warning you about burnout. You said you couldn't help it, that you had to try to help everyone." She paused. "It seems like you finally learned the lesson I tried to teach you 30 years ago." "What lesson?" I asked. "That you can't help people who don't want to help themselves," she said. "That giving to people who only take doesn't help them. It enables them. That the kindest thing you can do sometimes is to stop rescuing people and let them face consequences. That taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary." She smiled. "I'm proud of you for learning it, even if it took a while." Her words stayed with me. Maybe this whole painful experience with Max and Lena had been the universe finally teaching me a lesson I needed to learn. I had spent my whole life being the helper, the giver, the one who sacrificed. I had defined my worth by what I could do for others. And it had led me to a place where I was being drained dry and called a parasite for my trouble. Learning to say no, learning to choose myself, learning that my worth was inherent, rather than earned through giving. These were hard lessons, but valuable ones. Summer brought more growth. I started a small scholarship fund at the high school where I had taught, specifically for students from difficult financial circumstances. I wanted to help, but I wanted to help wisely, not enable dependence. The scholarship came with mentorship, financial literacy classes, clear expectations and boundaries. It felt good to give in a healthy way, in a way that empowered rather than created dependency. I also started attending a support group for people who had experienced financial abuse from family members. Sitting in that circle of people hearing their stories, I realized how common this was and how much shame surrounded it. People felt guilty for cutting off abusive family members. They questioned themselves constantly. They wondered if they were being too harsh, too unforgiving, too selfish. I shared my story, my court experience, my hard-won freedom, and I saw recognition and hope in people's faces. If I could do it, they could too. One woman in the group, a widow in her 60s named Susan, was being pressured by her daughter to take out a reverse mortgage and give her the money. After hearing my story, she found a lawyer and set boundaries. Her daughter was furious, cut off contact, threatened legal action, but Susan held firm. At one meeting, she told us, "I realized my daughter doesn't actually like me. She likes my potential to give her money, and I don't have to fund my own disrespect." We all nodded. We understood. Another man, Robert, was being financially drained by his adult son with addiction issues. He kept giving money, convinced he was helping, while his son never got treatment and never got better. After months in the group, Robert finally said no. He offered to pay for rehab, but not for rent or bills or anything else. His son chose the street over treatment, and Robert was devastated but firm. "I can't save him," Robert said, tears streaming down his face. "I can only save myself." We held space for his grief while celebrating his strength. These stories reminded me that my experience with Max and Lena, while painful, was not unique. Families are complicated. Money makes them more complicated. And sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest. But we all had the right to protect ourselves, to set boundaries, to choose our own well-being. That wasn't selfish. That was survival. As the months passed, I thought less and less about Max and Lena. They became characters in a story from my past, rather than active presences in my present. I didn't hate them. I didn't pine for them. I had simply moved on, the way you move on from any toxic situation once you realize it's not going to change. I had grieved the loss of the relationship I wanted with my son, and now I was living the life I had chosen for myself. My 73rd birthday came and went quietly. Margaret threw me a small party with close friends. We ate cake in my garden, surrounded by the flowers I had planted and nurtured. Someone asked if I had heard from Max. I shook my head. "Do you miss him?" they asked gently. "I miss who I thought he was," I said honestly. "But I don't miss the reality of who he is, and I'm okay with that." That fall, I did something I had been contemplating for a while. I wrote out my full story, all the details, and I sent it to a blog that shared stories of financial abuse and recovery. They published it with my permission, but without my name. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of comments from people who had experienced similar situations, who felt validated and less alone, who drew courage from my story to set their own boundaries. One comment stuck with me particularly. It was from a woman who said, "My mother-in-law has been supporting us for years, and after reading this, I realize we've been taking advantage of her. We've been so focused on our own struggles that we didn't see how we were draining her. I'm going to talk to my husband today about making changes. Thank you for opening my eyes." That comment gave me hope that maybe some families could course correct before reaching the point of no return. But most comments were from people in my position, not Max and Lena's. People who had been called ungrateful for setting boundaries. People who had been accused of losing their minds when they were actually finding their clarity. People who had been told they were being selfish when they were simply practicing self-preservation. To all of them, I offered the same message. You deserve respect. You deserve autonomy. Your money is yours to control. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Winter came again, marking 2 years since the word parasite had changed my life. 2 years since I had started choosing myself. I looked back at who I had been and who I had become, and I barely recognized my former self. That Renate had been so desperate to be needed, so afraid of being alone, so convinced that her worth lay in what she could provide to others. This Renate knew her worth was inherent. She knew being alone was not the same as being lonely. She knew that people who love you don't drain you dry and then call you a parasite. I had learned so much. I had learned that boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges to healthier relationships with people who respect them. I had learned that saying no is a complete sentence. I had learned that financial abuse is insidious precisely because it masquerades as need, as family obligation, as love. I had learned that competence doesn't mean never being hurt or never making mistakes. It means having the clarity to recognize problems and the strength to address them. Most importantly, I had learned that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot help others if you're drowning yourself. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop enabling destructive patterns and let people face the natural consequences of their choices. Maybe Max and Lena would learn and grow from having to support themselves. Or maybe they wouldn't. But either way, it wasn't my responsibility to fund their lives at the expense of my own well-being. On New Year's Eve, I sat by my fireplace with a cup of tea, reflecting on the past and thinking about the future. I had no grand resolutions. I simply wanted to continue living authentically, setting boundaries when needed, helping others in healthy ways, and enjoying the retirement I had earned. I had reclaimed my life from people who saw me as a resource rather than a person. That was enough. That was everything. There's no room for parasites in my life anymore. Not parasites who take financially. Not parasites who take emotionally. Not parasites who take my generosity and twist it into obligation, my love, and weaponize it into guilt. I had cleared my life of parasites, and what remained was authentic, reciprocal, respectful. I had friendships where care flowed both ways. I had community where I gave and received support. I had autonomy, dignity, and peace. My name is Renate. I'm 73 years old. I'm a retired teacher, a gardener, a reader, a traveler, a friend, a volunteer, a survivor of financial abuse. I spent 3 years and $37,000 learning a painful lesson about the difference between love and enablement, between helping and being used, between family and toxicity. And I spent the years that followed learning to choose myself, to set boundaries, to understand that my worth isn't determined by what I can give to people who don't appreciate it. I learned that karma isn't some mystical force. It's simply the natural consequence of actions catching up with people. Max and Lena spent years treating me like an ATM, culminating in calling me a parasite when I offered one more time to help. They tried to have me declared incompetent so they could continue accessing my money. And the karma, they lost. They lost in court. They lost their credibility. They lost their comfortable lifestyle funded by my retirement. And they lost me. But I didn't lose. I gained my freedom. I gained my self-respect. I gained the knowledge that I could stand up for myself even against my own son. I gained a community of people who understood my experience. I gained a purpose in speaking out and helping others in similar situations. I gained peace. If you're reading this and you recognize yourself in my story, whether you're 3 years in or 30, whether you've given $3,000 or $300,000, please know this. It's not too late to choose yourself. It's not selfish to set boundaries. You're not crazy for noticing you're being used. You're not a bad parent or grandparent or person for saying no. You have the right to control your own money and your own life, no matter what anyone tells you. Document everything. Get professional help from lawyers and financial advisors and therapists who understand elder financial abuse. Build your support network of people who respect your autonomy. Get evaluated if anyone questions your competence, so you have proof of your clarity. And most importantly, trust yourself. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Your instincts are valid. Your boundaries are valid. Your choice to protect yourself is valid. And to anyone out there who is doing to their parent or grandparent what Max and Lena did to me, stop. Sit with your conscience. Recognize that the person you're bleeding dry is a human being with feelings, needs, and rights. Understand that when you call someone a parasite while living off their generosity, karma will come for you eventually. It might come in the form of a judge denying your petition. It might come in the form of having to actually support yourself. Or it might come in the form of realizing too late that you destroyed a relationship that could have been beautiful for the sake of money you didn't earn. There's still time to change. There's still time to apologize, to make amends, to build a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial transaction. But that change has to come from you. Your parent or grandparent doesn't owe you their money, their constant support, or their willingness to be disrespected. They owe you nothing except what they choose to give freely, without manipulation or coercion. As for me, I'm living proof that it's possible to reclaim your life. I'm thriving in ways I never did when I was trying to buy love through bank transfers. I have genuine connections with people who value me for who I am, not what I can provide. I have activities that bring me joy. I have purpose that doesn't depend on being needed by people who don't appreciate me. I have peace that comes from living in alignment with my values and boundaries. From today forward, I choose myself. I said that 2 years ago in the darkness of my kitchen, and I've lived it every day since. Some days it's been easy. Some days it's been achingly hard. But every single day it's been right. Every single day I've been free. And freedom, I've learned, is worth more than all the money I gave away and all the relationships I lost in pursuit of it. So I ask you, whoever you are, wherever you are in your own story, what would you do in my place? Would you continue funding your own disrespect? Would you keep trying to buy love from people who see you as a resource? Or would you choose yourself? Would you set boundaries? Would you fight for your autonomy and dignity? Would you recognize that you deserve better than being treated like a parasite while being drained like a host? I hope you would choose yourself. I hope you would fight. I hope you would recognize your worth doesn't depend on what you can give to people who don't appreciate it. I hope you would find the courage to say no, to walk away, to protect what's yours. I hope you would learn the lesson I learned, painful as it was. Love that has to be bought isn't love at all. And freedom from toxic relationships, even family relationships, is a gift you give yourself. My journey isn't over. I'm still learning, still growing, still healing. But I'm doing it on my own terms, in my own time, with my own resources protected. I'm living the retirement I worked 37 years to achieve. I'm being the person I always had the right to be. Someone who matters, who has value, who deserves respect, not because of what she can give, but simply because she exists. There's no room for parasites in my life anymore. And there's no room for shame, guilt, or doubt either. There's only room for authenticity, for boundaries, for self-respect, and for the genuine love that comes from people who see me as a whole person rather than a walking wallet. That's the life I choose. That's the life I've built, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Not even the fantasy of the relationship I thought I had with my son. This is my story. This is my truth. This is my hard-won freedom. And if it helps even one person find the courage to protect themselves from financial abuse, to set boundaries with toxic family members, to choose themselves after years of choosing everyone else, then every painful moment was worth it. Because we all deserve to live lives of dignity, autonomy, and peace. Every single one of us, no exceptions. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And if you're in a similar situation, please know you're not alone. There are resources, there are support groups, there are lawyers who specialize in this. There are people who understand. Reach out, get help. Document everything. And most importantly, trust yourself. You know what's happening to you. You know when you're being used. You know when enough is enough, and when you finally choose yourself. When you finally set those boundaries and protect your resources and demand respect. Remember this. You're not a parasite for refusing to be drained. You're not selfish for protecting yourself. You're not crazy for recognizing abuse. You're clear. You're strong. You're free. And you're exactly who you need to be.